It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I take my first pass at the commander in front of us on a budget. My quest out brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, so I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider checking out the links in the description. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're continuing our Edge of Eternity's content, and today we're talking about Syr Vondam Sunstar Exemplar. A 2-mana Orzhov human knight with vigilance and menace that says whenever a creature we control dies or is put into exile, we're going to put a counter on Syr Vondam and gain a life. And whenever she dies or is put into exile while its power is 4 or greater, we're going to destroy up to one target non-land permanent. A lot of ways we could take this one. But to me, I think what makes the most sense is trying to find ways to blink creatures. So many of these great abilities in white and other creatures in our colors that care about things being blinked. And so we're going to do that to grow Vondam to be a threat and to set up some other value engines to do that. Even have ways to gain life when creatures come in that we could really take advantage of from it. But I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And if you're interested in seeing all of our videos just a little bit early for just $1 a month, consider checking that out down below. Well, all right. Like I said, you can't call a deck blink and not have ways to blink creatures. And there's a couple ways to do this. So you'll notice there's kind of two ways that blink's talked about. You have abilities that will exile a creature and bring it immediately back. And then you'll have abilities that exile a creature and bring them back at the end of turn. Both of these are fine. The ones that bring them back in right away is more ideal when we talk about pairing abilities together to try to chain these together. But both of them are effective. Now, you can do this a couple ways. You have spells like Acrobatic Maneuver or Cloud Shift that are just going to blink a creature once. We have things like Another Round that let us blink any number of creatures we control X times. This is a very interesting ability and can lead to a lot of fun on the right board state. Ephemerate and Flicker of Fate, again, both just blink one creature one time. Ephemerate does have that rebound, so as we cast from our hand, it exiles, and then in our next upkeep, we get to do it again. But we're going to bring in things like Conjurer's Clause. At the beginning of our end step, we get to blink a creature, so can add extra value right on our end step doing it again. Things like Teleportation Circle do the same thing, as well as Far Traveler. Now, with Far Traveler, we can only blink a tapped creature, but that's fine, because maybe it's a creature we attack with and we want to have it be blocked, or that kind of thing. It's not hard to get a creature tapped, and that's pretty useful for us. We also have something like Sword of Hearth and Home, that whenever it hits a player, we get to exile up to one target creature we own and then search our library for a basic land and put them both back on the battlefield. So not only do you get the ramp, but you get to blink as well. A very interesting way to add some value, right, to something we're probably going to want to be doing anyway. Especially something like Vondam, having Menace already. If your opponents have, green and white creatures, you should be pretty easily able to get, right, Vondam in and get that damage in. So I think probably the best question is, what are we going to try to blink? And the option is, there's a lot of interesting creatures. So Abdel Adrian is a creature you're going to see used in a lot of these blink shells for its ability. So when it comes in, you exile any number of other non-land permanents until it leaves the battlefield, and then make a soldier. The way that Abdel normally works is it's going to come in and exile a couple other things, but you're going to then have an immediate way to blink Abdel. So it's going to leave the battlefield. Those things are going to come back in, right? And you're going to try to create this loop where you have things entering and leaving. It's one of the ways to do that. Charming Prince can blink a creature till end of turn. Company Commander, every time it comes in, makes soldiers equal to the number of opponents you have. This could really help fund a sacrifice outlet to go more aristocratic if you want to with it, but I think we're going to stick into the blinks. Feldar Guardian just says whenever it comes in, exile another permanent, bring it back to the battlefield under its owner's control. Flicker Whiffs, again, blinks, but it comes back on end step. So what you can see, and we'll talk about these effects later, but one of the most common loops you're going to see in a blink deck is two creatures that when they come in, blink another one, and they're just going to blink each other back and forth and just try to rack up all of these triggers. Of course, we have something like Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Old Gary. Whenever it comes in, each opponent loses X, where X is your devotion to black, and we gain life equal to the life lost this way. This is a really nice ability because Even if your devotion is just the 2 to gray, even if your devotion to black is literally just Gray Merchant's devotion, as long as you can blink Gray Merchant an arbitrarily large amount of times, you're going to still nuke your opponents out with just the 2 devotion to black. Massacre Worm gives all creatures our opponents control -2/-2 on a turn when it comes in, and then whenever an opponent's controls creature opponent controls dies, they lose 2 life. So a fun way to get a nice little board clear. Restoration Angel, again, comes in and blinks a non-angel creature. Skyclave Apparition's a really interesting blink target. So when it comes in, you can exile up to 1 target non-land, non-token permanent with mana value 4 or less and opponent controls. But unlike other creatures where, when they leave the battlefield, that thing comes back. The owner of that card doesn't get it back. They just get an XX token where X was the mana value of that card. So if we just blink Skyclave a bunch of times, we could potentially get rid of a bunch of things. They get to stay in exile. Our opponent just gets a couple illusions for the privilege. I think we tackle this and also add value by caring about things entering and leaving. You have things like Corpse Knight. Whenever a creature we control enters, each opponent loses a life. A great ability for things that maybe make things when they come in. Guide of Souls is just going to gain us life whenever a creature comes in and gets us an energy, and we can get some creatures in the air on attack with paying energy. Elish Norn says if a permanent coming in under our control would trigger a triggered ability, it goes off twice, and permanents entering our opponent's control don't trigger any abilities. This is just really interesting and is going to allow cards like Corpse Knight to really help us take over the game as things come in and out. Halia from Edge of Eternities, whenever another creature or artifact we control enters, we gain a life, and we can draw a card at the beginning of our end step if we gain enough life. Ketramos says whenever one or more cards are put into exile from graveyards of the battlefield, we get to draw a card and lose a life. So this is going to help us start digging for pieces in our deck to find those loops. We want to make sure we pair Ketramos with something that can gain us life. Otherwise, we're going to really run the risk of dying if we can set up one of these blink loops, because Ketramos is just going to keep, drawing cards and losing us life. Mintharis at the beginning of our end step, if a permanent left the battlefield this turn from our control, we get an experience counter and all of our creatures get a nice buff. Can be really helpful if you have things that make tokens when either they come in or leave, just to allow us to have a wide board threat with Minthara. Preston says if another non-token creature enters the battlefield under control, if it wasn't cast, you make a copy of it that's an 0/1 white illusion. This will definitely help you set up some of these combos, because that token can then blink the original, right? Let's say it's something like Feldar Guardian, right? That when it came in, you blink another creature. Well, the token blinks the original. The original comes back in, it blinks something else, but Preston then sees another non-token creature coming back in, you make another copy of it. This is where you could really start setting up these crazy loops where you're blinking things and blinking things and blinking things, and we need to come in with some of these other effects, right, to take advantage of it. Blade of Selves makes a copy of a creature for each other opponent whenever you attack with it. This is really fun for a couple of reasons. One, if we were to put this on something like Syr Vondam, the 2 copies of Vondam would have to die because of the legendary rule, which is going to trigger her ability, right, gaining life and putting some counters on her. But you could just put this on a creature that has a blink ability. They're going to attack, make 2 more copies of itself that have the blink, and now you're going to get these blink triggers on the stack, right? And you get to really take advantage. You're going to start just, I think the goal of this deck is just to put a blink engine together where you're going to try to profit from it. Panharmonicon, whenever a creature comes in, and causes a triggered ability, it goes off twice. Again, pretty classic ETB, lines. So what are we going to look to do? Well, there's a couple ways we can do this. I think the most obvious to me is if Vondam's going to gain us a life when a creature exiles, right? That's a very easy trigger to take advantage of. I wanted to find a bunch of ways for our opponents to lose life whenever we gain life, right? Then we only need at maximum 40 triggers, or how many it may be. So you have things like Cliffhaven Vampire and Marauding Blight Priest, just say whenever we gain life, each opponent loses a life. The big thing to note about that ability is that if we were to pair Vondam with things like Guide of Souls or these Soul Sister type abilities that gain life whenever creatures leave or whenever creatures come in, you just need less triggers, right? The goal is to need as little triggers as possible to get our opponents to be dead, and we can even use combat damage to help. Now, Tenacity is a bit different. It's only a target opponent loses that much life, but it has a little protection that if it dies, it just comes back as an enchantment. But it's very useful, and it is going to pair you with your more classic life gain combo in something like Sanguine Bond or Exquisite Blood. But you see, Starscape Cleric, whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life. Veto says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And then same thing with Sanguine Bond. Fun thing about the Cleric is you can offspring it. So 5 mana total, you get 2 of them. So whenever you gain life, each opponent's losing 2 life, which is a pretty nice way to kind of stack this idea up and make it work even better. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my first shot at Syr Vondam, and I think going into testing, there's a lot of things we can take advantage of. Probably more of the Soul Sister, gain life on enters makes more sense to me now as I'm sitting here and realizing it in my head. That feels like it would be very good to me, especially if you're going to be blanking your creatures. There's some in the deck, but I think the answer is more. And then the question is, what would we want to blink? Well, you have something like Solemn Simulacrum, which can go get you lands, right? So that's kind of interesting. My thought was that new anti-causal vestige. It says whenever it leaves the battlefield, draw a card and put a permanent with mana value less than equal to the number of lands you control from your hand on the battlefield tab. So if you were to blink the vestige, right, you basically just keep drawing cards and putting permanents down. And the nice thing is if you had enough lands, you notice a lot of these, whenever you gain a life, your opponent loses a life, are 3 or 4 mana. So if you have 3 or 4 more, as long as you have 4+ lands, you're going to be able to put these key things in as you're going through this loop and trying to get it done. But let's do what we love to do on the channel the most and get into our playtests. Remember, the goal of playtests on our channel is not to find a magical Christmas land. It's not just to show off all our best plays, but it's getting some gameplay scenarios and kind of understand what we're looking to do and how we're going to do it. And what hands we're looking to keep. Here we got a 3-lander with Karlov of the Ghost Council. Whenever we gain life, we put 2 counters on it. And you can remove counters of it to exile a creature. There's Ketramos, and we see Teleportation Circle. So very interesting pieces to start. We see Flicker of Fate, a single target blink spell. Here, I think there's probably some answers at what you'd want to do here. I like the idea of something like Ketramos just to unlock some more draw, because I feel like we need to start really digging through our deck. Vondam can attack, but it has Menace, so we'd basically have to get it in somewhere, right, where we can get the damage in. All right, turn 4, we don't see another land, which would have been ideal, but remember that if something gets blinked, we're going to basically get some big value here. Now, unfortunately, it would be ideal if we didn't have to blink Vondam or Ketramos, right? Because both of them, seem to want something else to be blinked, right? So it almost makes you wonder if it's worth taking the turn to, play another creature to blink. Unfortunately, we don't have anything cheap enough to then still be able to cast Flicker of Fate. So the question is, do we take the turn, go for something like Corpse Knight, go for something like Karlov just to continue to support down on the board and keep going? That would make sense to me. Not a land again, but that's not ideal. But it's okay, because now we can draw. So I'm thinking Flicker, Karlov. Both of these are going to go off. Vondam gets a counter and gains us a life. Ketramos is going to lose us a life and draw. So you could start to see where that could be really beneficial. And then Karlov come back in. Again, unfortunately, it didn't get to see its own trigger right because it was already off the battlefield. But we at least did get to draw. Unfortunately, we didn't hit the land, but that was the goal. Okay. Well, the ideal was that we would hit another land, which is kind of unfortunate. We do have a decent amount of lands in the deck, but I think what makes the most sense here is just to get something like Flowering down. We can get some attacks, right, with them a little bit souped up. Oh, gosh. Just one of those playtests where you don't hit the lands. I think we got to try to blink something again. I'm just trying to think of how to do this. We really need that 4th land for Teleportation Circle. Right, that would be the ideal. I guess if something dies, right, we could get the counter, right? But I'm trying to think, I could get Hellion and just try to have an option to gain more life. I guess that would be my thought. Again, try to take some attacks here with the things that can. Maybe something can die. All right, we got to call this one. Unfortunately, just never got the 4th land, which is kind of awkward, but I think it's a part of playtesting that you need to keep in the back of your head is sometimes you're just going to get those odd hands where you don't see the things you need, don't see the mana rocks, don't see the lands. And it's easy to take this and stick it out like a sore thumb and just say, oh, my deck doesn't have enough lands or enough mana rocks. But I think this is the kind of hand where what you want to do is see, okay, let's play a few more hands, right? And if I continue to have that problem hand over hand over hand, right, then we need to go do something about it. So kind of unfortunate we did get to see some fun pieces, just didn't get to put it together. So let's get into playtest 2 here. This one's got 4 lands, so we got enough. We got enough for the Panharmonicon. We're just one off Sanguine Bomb. We got enough for the Company Commander. I really like the Company Commander. Again, it's a great blink target, giving yourself access to more of those 1/1s. Tainted Field in. I think the Cleric is more ideal once you have 5 mana, right, to be able to get the extra copy of it. I think I just hold it up. Because here I thought as the commander, we're going to get 3 soldiers. Equal number of opponents we control. Right, we have, right? And now, right, if these die, we can get some life and value on Vondam. Now my thought here is now get the Sunscape Cleric down. And now if these die, they die. But again, Company Commander can tax. All of our creatures get Death Touch. Maybe somebody puts the stuff in way these, maybe they don't. Either way, maybe we get a life trigger off Vondam. Maybe we don't. Probably, I would guess my opponents wouldn't want to touch it, but you never quite know. Blade of Selves feels great here on something like Company Commander, because the way this is going to work is Company Commander is going to attack. It's going to make 2 copies of itself attacking our opponents. Their ETBs are going to go off, making us all the 1/1s, but I just realized Company Commander is not legendary. Okay, I still think it's worth the soldiers. Right, and they're going to exile at the end of combat, so they're going to trigger Vondam no matter what. Again, they would get Death Touch, right, because of Company Commander's ability. Right, we can stack the Myriad trigger over the Company Commander to give them all Death Touch, so we're at least getting 2 counters on Vondam, and then each opponent's losing 4 life, right, because of the Starscape Clerics. And now, maybe people trade into the soldiers. All it's going to do is give, right, Vondam's more counters, more life gain, more life loss. Yeah, Flawless is great just to protect the board. I think the Tenacity could be good to start to or the Sanguine, like, start to really join up on those. I could also see something like Panharmonicon, just to, when you go to Myriad again, getting more soldiers, right, going wider and wider. Our opponents are going to have to start dealing with them, right? And I think, again, we got a nice board state here. We got multiple ways to protect our board. In this scenario, we have Flawless just straight for free, or we have Flare Fortitude that we can sack, something like Company Commander for, or we could always sack Vondam to it and just replay Vondam again if we like this. But at this point, we're just printing soldier tokens. It's going to be about how we make them die, right? So they can trigger, this life gain from Vondam. But also, they're just great blockers now. If somebody attacks in, chump with a bunch of them, get them to die, get the Scarscape Cleric triggers. We have protection on the board. We have something. Now it's just going to be finding another piece to continue it off. And I think this is the line you want to see if you're spinning towards Aristocrats, right? Getting these to die somehow. A lot of great creatures that have sack outlets for free. A couple new ones, a new one in Edge of Eternities. You have things like Bartolome from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So this is not a bad board state to be in if that's the route we want to go. But even on the route we were going, I still think it's fine because you just continue to print more soldiers. And if somebody kills them and doesn't kill Vondam or doesn't kill the Starscape Clerics, then we can just really take advantage. Here we got a 4-lander with Massacre Worm. There's the Cleric again and Tenacity again. And we see Preston the Vanisher, which is great. That's going to really help us out for when we can eventually blink a creature. I just realized I could have played Vondam last turn. I was on autopilot. Wasn't even paying attention. So here we see Parting Gust. Gust is a spell that for 2 mana lets you just exile a non-token creature, or if you promise the fish, you can basically just blink it and it comes back at the beginning of the next end step, which is pretty useful. The Cleric could make sense just to get something in and get something moving. All right, well, here we have enough mana for the Preston. I just don't have just quite enough to take advantage of everything else. I kind of like something like the Apparition. Maybe it's time to get something away from one of our opponents. Maybe we go for something like the Tenacity. I don't mind something like the Apparition. I almost don't want to run Preston out until I'm ready to use it because I feel like it's going to be a target for removal. Right? It seems like it is the ideal thing. But if I go Preston, then I can go Masker Worm next turn, right? Which it also is going to be brutal for our opponents. Um, I guess Gray Merchant isn't bad either, but all right, Masker, you get a copy of it, right, because of Preston as an illusion. -4/-4 to the opponent's board. If any of their creatures die, they're losing 4 life. And then, maybe we can just find a way to continue to make value. This is also nice because we can just be blinking Massacre Worm with Parting Gust, or if we can find another way to blink. This is also really nice for now Gray. Gray Merchant comes in. This won't have a pip. This won't have mana pips, right? Because it's a token that's made as a copy of this. So it won't have the black pips. But if, let's say this next turn we just hard casted Gray Merchant. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 life for everybody, and then you're getting a copy of it with Preston that's coming in and doing 7 life to everybody, right? And so I think you can kind of just start to see the value that can be made there. Again, didn't get to see any of these fun blink loops, but you're not always going to see them. I think it's about trying to find the value in the games where you don't always get to see the loops you want to see. 4-lander here with Rite of Oblivion. Nice removal spell. There's Acrobatic Maneuvers, and then Guide of Souls. Guide of Souls is great because you can gain life when creatures come in, and then you can get creatures in the air. Kind of thinking about putting that in. Right. Vondam. Gain us a life, get us an energy. I guess we could start loading up the planet if we want to, since we're not really attacking this turn. Love the idea of Far Traveler. Far Traveler could blink something. Charmed Prince could be interesting. Kind of like the idea of the Traveler, but I guess I have to attack with the Guide of Souls to make that worth it, right? I thought here is just scry 2. Let's dig and see. We have access to a life and an energy. We see Area Interlude, the ability to blink all of our creatures. And now Pharrell, whenever it attacks, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or spells warped, defending player loses half their life. So that seems like a pretty great creature to get. I think I'm cool with those two being there. I've got 2 mana left. I could Rite of Oblivion, but I kind of want to just continue to get up the station land. Because again, we could start sacrificing creatures with it to draw cards. Ethereal there. That and Vondam does turn it on. We just wouldn't have enough mana to use it. But now it is at least turned online. Right, that's another life. So we could attack and get, like Guide of Souls or something else in the air. Probably would have made more sense to go only 11 and basically give Vondam the counters and give it flying, right, with the Guide of Souls ability, right? And as we come back to our turn, 6 mana, Guide of Souls can turn this Secundi online, meaning we can sack a creature to draw cards equal to its power. So that's kind of an interesting ability. Would get us some counters on Vondam and some life gain. I'm trying to think of what else is the plan this turn. Far Traveler? Acrobatic Maneuver is interesting. I mean, I think we want to attack with Alfurio, right? Maybe it would have made sense to save the guide trigger for it. Almost thinking of just sacking the Prince and drawing 2. Just again, trying to dig into something more. We see Blade of Selves. Okay, Blade of Selves could be really fun. Again, for either triggering Vondam or triggering something else. We see Teysa getting us more triggers when things die. All right, we're starting putting some stuff together. Let's say that. And the reason we wanted to do this, the Segundi there, was so that the Void would be online, right? So that we could at least have somebody, get their life total in half. And to me, the Blade of Selves seems the most best on Vondam just to grow it. But I guess you could also argue you could go somewhere else. But that's what, 4 mana to do? Would we want to sacrifice something else? You go that plus something like Far Traveler and like blink Alfariel at the end step or something just to get extra guide triggers. Right, I think there's so many options of what we can do. I almost wish there was a trigger. I almost wish there was a trigger before these versions of Vondam died to like get one dead to the Segundi, but I think we just do that attack. Again, we get to energy and gain 2 because they came in, and then we get the counters on Vondam. This well, it's whenever it attacks. It would have to happen before it attacks, right? So I don't think it would trigger this turn. Okay, this one's a little bit more, I think, awkward just in the sense that I guess I could have started blinking Guide of Souls, right? It didn't need to attack. I could have blinked it this turn, right? Just acrobatic maneuvered it to draw a card. Then that would have triggered Void. There's the Hearth and Home. So yeah, that's I think on me on that one, not seeing the lines. And then getting the value, this nukes somebody else half their life, and then next turn, maybe the Hearth and Home can be the nice, next step to help bring us home. But I'd love to know, what do you think of Syr Vondam down in the comment section below? I don't think this one's perfect. I think it needs some work, especially with the Soul Sisters and finding, I would guess, more ways to try to set up those blink chains. I mean, arguably tutoring, right, fixes the problem, but I just am not a giant fan of that personally for bracket 3. I'm also just not a giant fan of tutors if I can help it as well. But I'd love to know what you think of Syr Vondam down in the comment section below, and I will catch you on the next.